So today is a big day for me. Um, Killing Joke came out, and this is something I have been looking forward to since I heard they were doing it. I thought Mark Hamill was going to be not doing another Joker voice. I thought of all the Batman stories they would put as a movie, this is one they might avoid. Um, but no, it was announced about a year ago, and today I watched it. And this is going to be a kind of review slash talk about a few things that have been mentioned so far from various review sites and YouTubers and things that have been happening this morning in response to it. um, so, first of all, spoiler warning, I'm going to discuss the movie in detail in terms of what I thought about it, what I thought they could have done better, what I thought it compares to the book, which is one of my all-time favorite Batman stories. Or it's not a Batman story; it's a Joker story. It's a Joker and Batgirl story at the end of the day. And again, that's something we'll discuss because whether it's a Joker story, a Batman story, or a Batgirl story is something I think they did slightly differently in this version. To the credit, I think it worked. It worked well. Um, but also in the sense that as a story, it always seemed to explore the stuff that I find most interesting about Batman and the Joker, which is that relationship of why they do what they do and the fact that Batman may well be very similar to him, and that's I think a recurring theme in a lot of stories. Um, Batman's own sanity, but this is probably the best example I can see of exploring that. I'll be honest, there are probably people out there that'll disagree with me because I've not read every single Batman that there has ever been. Um, I've read a lot of it, um, but unfortunately, I don't have the time or the money to track down every last comic from decades and decades and decades of Batman. Um, but it's something I do hope to do one day. So let's start with the movie before we get on to the reaction and the controversy regarding it. And I'll quote a few people that I've heard of. I may record a few times for reference. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because I'll enjoy anything with a Batman and Joker in it, especially when it's Hamill and especially when it's Kevin Conroy. So on that front, fine, absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed Mark Hamill's work. Really enjoyed Kevin Conroy's work. Enjoyed Tara Strong as Batgirl as well. She made a really good Batgirl. Although I'll always associate Tara Strong with Harley. I've talked about Harley before. I love Harley. So the first thing that struck me when I was watching this is the first 25 minutes to half an hour has no Joker. And it is a story about Batgirl and her relationship with Batman slash Bruce Wayne and how that affects her decisions, his decisions. And it starts off with Batgirl tracking down a really petty local guy, thug, um, who kills his mafia uncle and takes over the business and has like a little obsession with Barbara. Um, and it's very much, at least the way I perceived it, it was very much designed to be a parallel between Batman and the Joker. It's kind of a lead in the way he talks to her about it being a personal connection between her and this guy because he starts getting obsessed with her. It led it back to me to the way that the Joker and Batman kind of go ahead is that it's not about the wider picture, it's about them together interacting. So here's what I didn't like. I think that went on too long. I think it was important to put in there because the Killing Joke, if you adapted that as is, it's about you know 20 minutes, 30 minutes, so it's not a huge story. It's not a very long story, and they did adapt pretty much in its entirety. There were a lot of themes which and sorry, a lot of panels that made it straight to the screen, which is great. Um, Definitely, the scene with her getting paralyzed. A lot of the shots and the angles were the same. Um, throughout them, the pictures on the wall when Gordon's going through the haunted house were the same pictures used, or very similar design, obviously different art style. The same pictures that they used in the comic book Alan Moore did, or wrote. Sorry, didn't draw. So as far as the adaptation part of it, that was spot on. You couldn't have asked for anything better. I think they dragged out the prologue part to it a little bit too long. They could have done that pretty short and maybe elaborated more on things inside the actual book. So they could have done a little bit more with Joker's backstory or alleged backstory. And they could have done a little bit more in that sort of terms. Because really, the second half of the movie is two scenes. It's Batgirl getting paralyzed and Gordon at the carnival. That's the two locations they use, and that's the only ones that are really in the comic book as well. So that I didn't enjoy as much. Now, the reason for that as well, in the way they told Barbara's story, or Batgirl's story, is her relationship with Batman. You may have seen this already. People have talked about it at length, but she has sex with Batman, and it's told in a really weird way because she starts getting upset with him and starts fighting him. Obviously, he's just brushing her off because he's Batman. And then they end up on top of each other, and she ends up on top of him, and they have a kiss, and then she takes the top off, and then it ends. And then Batman's a bit of a dick to her, as Batman would be because he's Batman. And that's how their relationship goes. Now, I've got no problem with them showing Barbara in a kind of sexual light and having her have those feelings towards Batman, but I always read into their relationship as very much a parental relationship. He was always a parental figure to Batgirl/Barbara. So having that happen just seemed a little bit out of left field. Now, again, I haven't read every comic. That may have happened or been touched on more, but certainly in the ones that I've read and the things that I've seen, apart from a brief thing in Batman Beyond that I remember, it was never really brought up. It was always a parental relationship. I mean, it was always him as a father figure to her and sort of guiding her through that. And putting that in this movie just seems to change her motivations too much. And it's not something I particularly thought helped the reasoning for it. But nothing against it. If they want to go down that route, that's fine. I mean, the comic book was never canon officially anyway, because it was always one of those weird side stories to Batman that is half canon, half not. So the parallelization was canon, but some would argue that the origin story with Joker was or wasn't. It's his retelling of it, not anyone else's. It's not factual. It's just his retelling. So there's that. And that leads into a few things that people have said about how it disempowers her as a character and everything else. I disagree with that. I think regardless of her motivations up to that point, her decision to hang up being Batgirl just before then, and then getting paralyzed, and that obviously will bring her back into being Oracle, makes a lot more sense. Here's the second part with it. So once that's all happened and we get into the Killing Jokes part of it, when she is paralyzed, she's in bed, then Gordon goes through, that was all handled faultlessly. In fact, there's a song and dance number they put in by the Joker, which was absolutely brilliant. It was just Mark Hamill just going to town on it. And, that I think is one of those really, really great moments in Batman animated movies. Very much reminded me of the song he did in Arkham Knight, which I really liked as well. So, there's that. I think they downplayed Batgirl as a victim kind of thing. They didn't over-linger on what happens there. There is a kind of creepy moment where Joker starts unbuttoning her blouse, which I think has upset some people. Again, I've got no problem with it. He's a psychopath. He's going to do stuff like that. You don't see him sexually assault her or anything like that. There's not even a reference to anything like that happening. So it's a weird thing. I mean, Joker's never been, although it's been hinted at, obviously with Harley and with a scene with some hookers in this, which is really weird. Um, that, but I've always seen Joker as not a very sexual entity. Anyway, he's kind of above that, if that makes sense. He's never been particularly sexually driven as a character. I've never seen it touched upon much apart from with Harley, but that's been more about the romance side of things rather than a sexual tension. So here's the one big thing which I disliked, and I suppose you could still, and this is why it probably wasn't canon. The very very end scene. So this is a really famous part of the comic book where at the end, Batman and Joker have a little conversation. Batman's beat the shit out of the Joker, and he's just laying there, and he's saying, let's just do the same thing again. You'll beat the crap out of me. You'll go back to asylum, and then the cycle will begin again. And that's something that always happens. And I think a big part of why this is an important story is it touches on the fact that it is a repeating cycle of just the same thing happening again. And it's when does Joker do something bad enough that Batman will break his one rule and kill him. And in the comic, you see a kind of fade to a black and white image of Batman's hands either on Joker's shoulders or on his neck, and him laughing and them sharing a laugh together. Now, that's always been interpreted as either Batman going a little bit crazy or Joker or him actually strangling and breaking Joker's neck. This makes it less ambiguous. It is much more Batman just laughing. His hands are clearly on Joker's sort of chest and shoulder area. They're not around his neck. There's no insinuation there that he's hurt the guy. It would have been difficult to do anyway because, they couldn't have had him just straight up kill the Joker because that would have been too obvious. And obviously affect things down the line as well. But I feel like they could have done the same fade to a single shot of that, and it had more impact than doing it in full color and having it be an animation frame rather than a still frame. I think they made it too. They kind of took a side with which way they wanted to show it, which was just Batman having a laugh for once. I don't think he ever laughs ever again. So that's important. That's something that irked me somewhat. So, as far as the movie goes, animation, brilliant. Voices, brilliant. Story was one of the best ones written by Batman at all, apart from the first 20 minutes or so. Excellent. The first minutes did drag on a bit. But after that, it really picked off. And again, the performances were outstanding. So why are people upset about it? And this is the big thing. So I've seen a lot of reviews this morning, and some saw it yesterday. I know some screenings were done in America in cinemas. We didn't have that over here. I had to buy it. People were saying when it was announced that they shouldn't do it because it objectified Batgirl, and there's actually a line about objectifying in the movie, which is quite funny. When Batman's referring to the guy that's obsessed with Barbara, Paris something, I forget his name. He's kind of a throwaway character. And he really doesn't. It doesn't make any sense why he will be upset about this. Bad things happen in comic books. That's a given. There is a slight sexual overtone with some things, but again, the Joker's not a good guy. He's not a nice person. He's gonna do stuff like that to mess with people. If anything, the insinuation when he's showing Gordon the pictures of Barbara naked is not that he actually molested her. It's to make Gordon think that he might have done, or someone might have done. And that's what he's using to get in Gordon's head, because that's obviously a parental thing that Gordon's going to be thinking of at the time. So he's going to be that's again designed to really get inside his head and turn him mad, which is what his objective is in this. I've seen a few things, people saying, "Oh, it was 30 years ago, and it's a story that shouldn't be told again because we've changed as a people." No, we haven't. People still watch stuff like this. People still enjoy stuff like this. Don't try and retroactively change stories because we're living in a because it's current year and we have to be more PC now and we can't show women being abused. No, show them being abused, but show the real consequences of that happening, and show what actually and make sure that you tell it as a complete story, which this did. Barbara gets her own moments in this earlier on, and that's why they did it. So they tried to give her more of her own story. And anyone that knows what happens to Barbara afterwards will know that she is empowered by this. And there's lots of moments where she does get her own back in many ways. And I think that's important to take away from it as well. You know, we can't protect reality from modern sensibilities sometimes. That is, it's a dark thing. It's a dark story. And if you're offended by shit like that, then maybe you shouldn't be reading Batman anyway, because they deal with dark shit all the time. That's why I love it, and that's why a lot of people love it. It is a darker stories than anything else, especially Joker stories. They're always kind of fucked up. That's what makes them interesting. So to anyone that watches this movie going into it thinking, oh, it's 2016, we shouldn't be objectifying women in movies, we shouldn't be showing women being abused and not having a moment where they castrate someone, which is a trope that I've noticed recently. um, Especially in dark stuff, woman gets raped, woman castrates guy. That's always what happens, which is fine. But yeah, just enjoy it for what it was. It was a great thing to see. It's fantastic that they're doing these older books in with amazing acting, great animation. It's definitely worth watching. If you get a chance to, please buy it. Please show that. I'm not going to shit on someone for pirating it because people do that, but I think it's something that Warner Brothers needs to be aware of, that there's a market for, and that no matter what critics say, people want to see it and people are excited about it. And I mean, there's a great thing that happened at Comic Con where one of the writers, I forget his name, I'm sorry, um, one of the audience at Comic Con said, "Oh, said something, I don't know what it was," and then he came back with, "Oh, just shut up, you pussy." And that sums up how a lot of people feel. It's just, if you don't like it, don't watch it. Shut up, you pussy. Simple. No one's being hurt by this. No one's, it is a 30-year-old story. What if they remade A Clockwork Orange and showed, or Straw Dogs, or anything like that, any sort of classic horror dark story that involves sexual rape or molestation or anything like that? These stories are still good. These stories are still classic stories. Maybe not Straw Dogs, that's a personal favourite. But that doesn't change them being important. In fact, it makes them more so. Because when you have a story that involves, when you have a bad guy in a story, it's kind of seen as a trope that they resort to rape and molestation and being generally creepy towards women. And that's kind of seen as instantly how to make you detest a character. You see it in TV, bad guys all the time. Walking Dead uses it to excess. It's like instantly you want to make a bad guy seem reprehensible, have them hurt kids, animals, or women. That's how you make a character vile, or all three. Um, so it's like a kind of writing trope in terms of TVs and films and comics. But I guess the takeaway from it is, as the writer said, do not be a pussy. It's a great thing. It's important that we see it now, I think more than ever. So that's my verdict on it. I really loved it. I'm going to watch it again. I implore anyone who is able to in the region that you're from to spend money on it, to support it. And that's it. That is the Killing Joke. That is one of the best Batman stories brought to life on the screen with the best voice acting that you can get in a Batman story. Thank you very much. I've been Gummy Bear. You have a lovely day.